The average Social Security check in 2026 lands somewhere around $1,900 a month. The average American home costs $420,000. Do that math, and it breaks almost immediately. And yet, roughly 40% of Americans over 65 rely on Social Security for the majority of their income. So either millions of people are quietly drowning, or there are places in this country where that check actually covers a life. Not just technically, but comfortably. There are 10 of them specifically, and none of them are where retirement content usually points you. Not Florida, not Arizona. Not any place that's been selling the dream of a golf cart and a permanent tan since the 1980s. The states on this list are the ones where housing costs sit so far below the national average that a retiree can buy a home outright. No mortgage, no landlord, just done. Where state governments have legally eliminated their ability to touch Social Security income. Where the monthly cost of groceries, transportation, and utilities fits inside what the federal government is already sending. Here's the mechanism that most retirement content skips past. The interior of the United States runs about 10% cheaper on basic living expenses than coastal states. That 10% sounds modest. For a retiree on a fixed income, it is the difference between making rent and not making rent. This is a countdown of 10 US states where the numbers actually work for someone living entirely on Social Security. We're going from number 10 down to number 1, and the distance between the worst and best option on this list is significant. Each state gets here through a specific combination of tax law, housing cost, and livability. Not vibes, not speculation. By the end, the top pick isn't just affordable. The financial structure is almost frictionless. That's a specific claim. Here's how we get there. Here are 10 best US states to retire in when Social Security is your only income. West Virginia. The coal industry's collapse left West Virginia with something it never planned for, an oversupply of houses and not enough buyers. That sounds like a problem. For a retiree arriving with a federal check, it looks more like an opening. West Virginia is the only state situated entirely within the Appalachian Mountain system. For decades, those mountains meant coal, and coal meant employment. When the industry contracted, the workforce left, but the houses stayed. The result is a housing market where the typical home sells for around $168,000, the lowest of any state on this list, and where structurally sound, livable properties can be found under $100,000 in smaller towns and rural areas. The tax picture is almost resolved. West Virginia has been phasing out its state tax on Social Security benefits for several years, and that process completes in 2026. This year, retirees moving now arrive right as the last piece of financial friction disappears. Monthly living costs land around $2,126, which for many Social Security recipients sits within reach, particularly once a home is purchased outright and the housing line item drops from rent to insurance and upkeep. Charleston, the state capital, sits at the junction of the Elk and Kanawha rivers and provides the most accessible urban infrastructure in the state, healthcare networks, government services, and a functioning downtown that reflects its history as a regional hub. Huntington, about 50 miles west, is the second city anchored by the Port of Huntington Tri-State, which ranks among the busiest inland ports in the country. Both cities give retirees access to basic services without requiring full rural immersion. The honest qualification here is the hollers, narrow mountain valleys where small, isolated communities have existed for generations and where the infrastructure is genuinely thin. These are not places that integrate newcomers easily, and retirees who move to rural West Virginia expecting the social environment of a mid-sized city will be disappointed. The state rewards people who actually want the mountains, not people who want affordable rent near mountains. If that distinction lands right, the entry cost here is lower than anywhere else on this list. Mississippi. Mississippi has the lowest per capita income in the United States. That fact, which represents a serious structural problem for the people who live and work there, creates an unusual financial environment for retirees arriving with an external federal check. When a local economy is poor, prices conform to it. Groceries, services, rent, restaurants, everything prices toward what the local population can actually pay. A retiree whose income comes from Washington rather than from the local job market steps into that pricing environment with a structural advantage that isn't available in wealthier states. The Social Security check doesn't shrink because Mississippi is economically depressed. The cost of living does. Mississippi exempts Social Security income from state taxation entirely. It also exempts pensions and most other retirement income vehicles, one of the broadest retirement income protections in the country. The typical home sits around $186,000. Average monthly rent runs around $744. Total monthly cost of living estimates come in at approximately $2,204. Location selection matters here more than almost anywhere else on this list. The Mississippi Gulf Coast, Biloxi, and Gulfport offers maritime scenery, casino amenities, and genuine lifestyle options, but it carries the state's highest costs. Inland, the Meridian area provides more affordability and a slower pace. The city has cultural anchors, a notable arts and entertainment museum, and a historic Denzel carousel. And the surrounding area offers river recreation that's genuinely accessible on a fixed income, but the dominant experience is quiet and unhurried. The systemic trade-offs are real and shouldn't be obscured. Public infrastructure in Mississippi reflects the same poverty that makes the state affordable. Schools are underfunded, public services are stretched. For retirees without school-aged children and without reliance on local employment, those failures don't hit directly, but they shape the surrounding environment in ways that are visible day to day. This is a financial safety net state. It is not glamorous, but for someone whose Social Security check is the entire income, Mississippi's combination of tax policy and depressed costs does something very few states manage. It makes the arithmetic genuinely work. Alabama. Alabama doesn't lead with the most dramatic housing number or the most headline-grabbing exemption on this list. Its edge is quieter and more durable, a property tax structure that doesn't let housing costs grow out from under you over time. In most states, rising home values eventually translate into rising property tax bills. For a retiree on a fixed income, that slow escalation is a specific and underappreciated threat. The cost of owning a home you've already paid for creeping upward year after year at a rate that Social Security cost of living adjustments may not match. Alabama's effective property tax rates are among the lowest in the country, which largely diffuses that dynamic. Combined with a full exemption on Social Security income, the two primary mechanisms by which housing costs erode a fixed income budget are both addressed at the legislative level. The typical home runs around $229,000 statewide, with average monthly rent at $764. Monthly food and miscellaneous expenses land around $625, transportation around $304, and total monthly cost of living at approximately $2,172. City selection in Alabama requires active research. Huntsville, the state's largest and fastest growing city, transformed by aerospace and defense, offers high quality of life but costs to match. The most affordable retirement zones sit outside the major metros, in rural areas where homes can still be found under $100,000. Though at that price point, a roof replacement within 5 years is a realistic expectation. Areas of concentrated poverty affect surrounding infrastructure in ways that a statewide average doesn't capture, and the retirees who do best here tend to be the ones who visited multiple times and chose deliberately. Alabama also offers a community culture, anchored in local festivals and a social warmth that's genuine rather than performed, that provides a texture to daily life no tax table can quantify. For retirees who want a social retirement, that element is harder to find in the states above it on this list. Oklahoma. Most affordable retirement lists eventually ask you to trade urban life for a lower cost of living. Oklahoma doesn't make that trade. It offers an actual city with museums, universities, medical infrastructure, and varied neighborhoods at a price that works on a Social Security budget. Tulsa and Oklahoma City are among the most affordable large metropolitan areas in the country. For retirees who need access to what cities provide, and for many older adults, that access is not optional. Most cheap state options require accepting a rural or small town setting as the price of affordability. Oklahoma doesn't. You can live in a genuine metropolitan environment and still keep costs within what a federal retirement check covers. Oklahoma doesn't tax Social Security, and property taxes across the state are among the lowest in the region. The typical home statewide sits around $214,000. Average monthly rent runs around $749. Total monthly living costs land around $2,196. Metropolitan numbers, not numbers earned by living somewhere isolated. Tulsa is the more architecturally distinctive of the two cities. Its early 20th century oil boom produced one of the largest concentrations of Art Deco architecture in the United States. The Philbrook and Gilcrease museums anchor a cultural scene that goes beyond what a city of Tulsa's size would typically support. Oklahoma City offers a more spread-out, suburban-style metro experience and a range of neighborhoods with different cost profiles. The realistic caveat with Tulsa is that documented residential segregation patterns mean geographic awareness matters when choosing where specifically to live. Certain neighborhoods require informed research before committing. What Oklahoma does that most states on this list can't match is preserve the social infrastructure of urban living for retirees who need it. Isolation is a documented health risk for aging adults. A state where you can afford a city isn't just financially useful, it's livable in a way that a rural county with cheap land simply isn't for everyone. Arkansas. Arkansas rewards the retirees who do their research. The broad version, tax-friendly, affordable, beautiful landscape, is accurate. The more important version is that Arkansas contains dramatically different regional environments, and moving to the wrong part of the state is a mistake that's hard to undo. The state spans from the flat Mississippi Delta in the east to the Ozark and Ouachita mountain ranges in the northwest. Pine Bluff in the southeastern Delta has experienced significant population decline and economic hardship. The northwest corner is a different story entirely. Stronger economic activity, better infrastructure, and access to mountain scenery and outdoor recreation that rivals states charging significantly more for it. Social Security is fully exempt from Arkansas income tax. The typical home sits around $216,000. Average monthly rent is $682, the lowest average rent figure of any state on this list. Monthly food and miscellaneous expenses run around $637, transportation around $311, and monthly cost of living comes in around $2,123. Two honest tax complications deserve naming. First, while Social Security is exempt, other retirement income, IRAs, 401s, gets taxed beyond a $6,000 annual deduction. For retirees who are purely Social Security dependent, that limitation is irrelevant. For those with mixed income sources, it requires calculation. Second, Arkansas has some of the highest sales tax rates in the country, which partially offsets the savings on property taxes. The tax structure as a whole favors homeowners over renters. The northwest corner is where the specific recommendation lives, not the broad state. The Ozarks provide rivers, trails, and small mountain towns at a price point that a fixed income can genuinely access. Without that geographic specificity, Arkansas is a much less compelling case. Kentucky. Kentucky's pitch is not excitement, it's predictability. And for someone whose monthly income doesn't flex, predictability has a dollar value that most retirement planning underestimates until it's absent. The state doesn't tax Social Security. It also provides a retirement income exemption of approximately $31,110 per person annually on other income sources, which means retirees with modest pension income are likely operating in largely tax-exempt territory without needing to structure anything deliberately. The typical home sits around $224,000. Monthly groceries, utilities, and household expenses land around $640, transportation around $303, and total monthly cost of living at approximately $2,150. Kentucky sits along the Ohio River, sharing borders with West Virginia, Ohio, Tennessee, and Missouri, several of which appear on this list, which says something about the affordability corridor running through this specific part of the country. Being within reach of multiple regional metro areas while maintaining costs well below the national average is a geographic dividend that compounds over years of retirement. The honest caveat about culture is worth stating plainly. Kentucky has a distinct social identity, but the day-to-day texture of life here is quieter and slower than any of those associations suggest. Visiting for several weeks before committing to a move is a genuine prerequisite, not a hedge. Some newcomers find the insularity of long-established communities difficult to navigate. The retirees who do best in Kentucky tend to be the ones who chose it consciously, not the ones who defaulted to it because the price was right. The financial argument, separate from culture, is close to airtight. If the goal is reliable coverage of every basic expense every month without financial stress, Kentucky's cost structure makes that achievable on a Social Security check. The state doesn't promise excitement, it promises that the lights stay on. Iowa. Iowa is not going to make a dramatic case for itself. That restraint is, functionally, the whole case. The state exempts Social Security from income tax for residents 55 and older, and has been progressively expanding exemptions on broader retirement income. The typical home sits around $225,000. Those numbers are competitive, but not the most headline-worthy on this list. What distinguishes Iowa isn't the price. It's the stability of the market behind it. Iowa home values don't swing with gentrification cycles or speculative investment patterns. There are no Sunbelt boom and bust dynamics here, no neighborhoods being priced out from under long-term residence by an influx of remote workers. The market is stable in a way that coastal and southern growth markets explicitly are not. A budget that works in Iowa this year will still work in Iowa in 5 years. That is not a guarantee available in states where rising local demand can push property taxes, rents, and ancillary costs upward faster than a Social Security cost of living adjustment can compensate. The demographic Iowa most specifically serves, the 55 and older cohort, benefits from a tax environment that has been deliberately shaped around their income structure. The state hasn't accidentally become affordable for retirees. It has legislatively moved toward that position and continues to expand retirement income exemptions. That signals a direction of policy travel worth noting when thinking about long-term financial planning, not just current year costs. The trade-off is direct. Iowa is quiet. For retirees who need urban stimulation, metropolitan cultural access, or a sense of geographic energy, it will feel flat. It doesn't offer Tulsa's Art Deco skyline or Tennessee's live music. It offers a retirement in which nothing surprising happens to your finances. And for a specific kind of retiree, that is the product. Missouri. Missouri made a concrete move in 2024. It eliminated state taxes on Social Security income entirely. That's recent enough that many people haven't updated their mental model of the state, which is precisely where the opportunity sits clearest, in the gap between what a place has become and what people think it still is. The typical home in Missouri sits around $254,000, which is more than $160,000 below the national average. For retirees selling property in California, New York, or any other high-cost market before relocating, that gap frequently means arriving with substantial equity, purchasing a Missouri home outright, and still retaining significant liquid reserves. The Social Security check in that scenario no longer needs to cover housing at all. It covers everything else. Monthly expenses are mid-range for the 10 states here. Food, utilities, and miscellaneous around $652, transportation around $290, average rent at $767, total monthly cost of living lands around $2,171. What Missouri adds beyond the tax change is variety. The state ranges from St. Louis, a major city with genuine metropolitan infrastructure and cultural depth, to the quiet farmland and small towns of the Central Corridor, to the Lake of the Ozarks region. The 2024 tax law applies statewide, regardless of which version of Missouri a retiree chooses. That universality, a range of environments all operating under the same favorable tax code, is genuinely uncommon on this list, where affordability often means accepting a narrow set of lifestyle options. Missouri doesn't have the dramatic cheapness of West Virginia or Mississippi. It doesn't carry the cultural celebrity of Tennessee. What it has is a recent concrete policy change that makes it a meaningfully better proposition today than it was 3 years ago. For people who assessed Missouri and moved on, 2024 changed the answer. Tennessee. Tennessee has no state income tax, not an exemption structure with income thresholds to track, not a reduced rate for qualifying retirees, no income tax at all. Social Security arrives intact. Every other form of retirement income arrives intact. To fund itself without income tax, Tennessee relies on a sales tax that reaches around 9.5% when local rates combine with the state figure. For retirees, that trade-off typically runs favorable. The largest monthly expense for most retired households is housing, not retail consumption. A high sales tax on everyday purchases is a different and smaller financial exposure than a state income tax on a fixed federal check. The typical home value in Tennessee has climbed to around $323,000, the second highest on this list. The state has seen consistent population growth across most decades, and that sustained demand has sustained price pressure. The affordable Tennessee window that existed a decade ago has been narrowing, and anyone who arrived with an older pricing expectation will find the current market different. The lifestyle options across the state are genuinely distinct. Nashville carries the state's most recognizable cultural identity, a major music city with a downtown entertainment economy that extends well beyond country music. Memphis sits on the Mississippi River with deep historical roots in blues and soul music, though specific urban neighborhoods carry documented crime concerns that require careful location research. The Smoky Mountain Corridor, anchored by Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, gives outdoor-focused retirees access to Great Smoky Mountains National Park and a surrounding tourism infrastructure that functions as a year-round amenity. Tennessee is for retirees who want an active retirement with real cultural access and outdoor reach, and who want their tax advantage to be unconditional rather than contingent on maintaining eligibility for an exemption. The financial caution is on the housing side. At $323,000 median, Tennessee has been moving upmarket, and that trend is unlikely to reverse. Anyone counting on Tennessee being the affordable option should run current numbers before committing. South Dakota. South Dakota doesn't make retirement affordable through a list of exemptions and legislative carve-outs. It does it by not taxing income at all. No state income tax, Social Security is untouched. All retirement income is untouched. Nothing from the federal check is redirected at the state border. What this creates isn't just a tax advantage, it's a budget that requires almost no tax planning. A retiree in West Virginia needs to track when the Social Security exemption fully completes. A retiree in Arkansas needs to calculate what portion of IRA withdrawals fall outside the $6,000 deduction. A retiree in Tennessee needs to monitor sales tax exposure relative to their spending patterns. A retiree in South Dakota needs to do none of that. The federal government sends a check. That number is the budget. The state government has no structural claim on any part of it. The typical home value sits around $308,000, placing South Dakota in the higher tier of this list on housing cost. For retirees relocating from high-cost markets, the equity conversion opportunity is significant. Selling in a market where housing commands a premium and buying in South Dakota typically produces a paid-off home and remaining liquid capital, which fundamentally changes how far a monthly Social Security check reaches when it no longer needs to service any housing debt. The primary and honest trade-off is winter. South Dakota winters are not a moderate inconvenience to plan around. They are a defining characteristic of the state's climate that shapes daily life for several months each year. Sustained cold, real snowfall accumulation, and temperatures that demand both physical and logistical preparation. For retirees who genuinely enjoy ice fishing, hunting, and cold weather outdoor recreation, the season is part of the appeal rather than a cost of admission. For anyone who moved to Tennessee specifically to leave behind upper Midwest winters, South Dakota is a different answer to a different question. What South Dakota offers, more purely than any other state on this list, is financial independence from state-level fiscal decisions. No exemptions that a future legislature could modify or phase out. No income thresholds that might not keep pace with benefit increases. No trade-offs to calculate between sales tax exposure and income tax savings. The structure is clean in the way that only the complete absence of a tax can be. For retirees who want to know exactly what their monthly retirement finances look like every single month, without variables, without phase-outs, without planning. That simplicity is the actual product South Dakota is selling. Nothing else on this list delivers it as completely. 10 states, one consistent thread across all of them. The retirees who land well in these places are not the ones who picked the cheapest state off a ranking and moved. They're the ones who matched a specific place to a specific financial reality. Mississippi's comprehensive tax exemption is a different tool than South Dakota's zero income tax structure. West Virginia's housing surplus requires a different kind of person than Tennessee's cultural amenities attract. The inland 10% cost discount that runs across all of these states only works if the lifestyle that comes with that discount is one you can genuinely live inside. The mechanics underneath the ranking are straightforward. Interior states run cheaper, Social Security exemptions extend the purchasing power of a fixed federal check, and owning a home outright converts a precarious monthly budget into a manageable one. Where all three of those conditions align most cleanly and most durably is where a Social Security check stops being a source of stress and starts being a foundation. The geography of that alignment is not random. It runs through the interior of the country in a corridor that most retirement planning has systematically ignored. That's not a motivational frame. It's just what the numbers show, and the numbers happen to point to 10 very specific places. If Social Security is your retirement plan, the question was never whether it could work, it was always where.